The murder has been detected, isn't it? So now we find in this particular later half of Act 2, Scene 3, how different people react. We have seen how Macbeth reacted. We will now see how Lady Macbeth and Macbeth actually react in the second half of this scene. Also, how Malcolm and Donalbain react. Okay, so दिल थाम कर हमारे साथ चलिए मैकबेथ के अंदर. So enter Lady Macbeth. Now, Lady Macbeth says, "What is the business that such a hideous trumpet calls to parley the sleepers of the house? Speak, speak." So look at the rather ornamental language that she's using, even though she's completely aware of what she and her husband have done in the dead of the night. Okay, and that kind of conveys an extremely scheming and extremely crafty kind of person, right? Look at the quality of the language that she speaks. That such a hideous trumpet calls to parley. Now, that's not a very usual. Parley is, when you kind of negotiate and communicate with someone else. So she says, what is going on that such an awful, hideous means such an awful trumpet as in the musical instrument, is calling everyone who is sleeping to come together, to parley, to discuss, right? To discuss the sleepers of the house, all the people who are still asleep, because it's not yet, fully dawn as yet. It's not like, proper morning. Speak up and tell me. Macbeth says, "Oh, gentle lady." Now, this is extremely ironic. This is extremely ironic because she's anything but a gentle lady. Isn't that so? So she's anything but a gentle lady. So Shakespeare is using language in order to, and if you are sitting in the audience and Macbeth calls her, "Oh, gentle lady," you could always, imagine as members of the audience smirking, gentle lady. And that's precisely what Shakespeare's intention is, right? It is not for you to hear what I can speak. The repetition in a woman's ear would murder as it fell. So he says that my news is not, the information that I have, what I have seen and what I know right now is not fit enough for your ears to hear. Reporting it to a woman's ears would kill you instantly because the information is so terrible, right? With murder as it fell. And at that point in time, Banquo enters. "Oh, Banquo, Banquo, our royal masters has been murdered. Her king has been murdered." So he reveals it to the man, that is Banquo, refuses to reveal it to a woman, that is Lady Macbeth, because he believes that the news is so terrible that it cannot be communicated to a woman. So Lady Macbeth says, "How horrible, in our own house." In our own house. Banquo says, "Too cruel anywhere." Well, a murder would be cruel anywhere. Why just in your house? It would be cruel if it were to be committed just about anywhere. "Dear Duff," that is Macduff, "I prithee contradict thyself and say it is not so. Say what you have said just now is not true, because I can't bear to hear this kind of an information. That, please say that you are lying. Contradict yourself means tell me that what you have just now said is not exactly the truth." And Macbeth and Lennox return along with Ross at that point in time. Macbeth, "Had I but died an hour before this chance, I had lived a blessed time. For from this instant there is nothing serious in mortality, all is but toys." Now this particular passage is important, as is another passage of Macbeth a little later. Macbeth says, at this point in time, he says, and he's very obsessed with I. He says that if I had died an hour earlier, before this event took place, that is before the murder took place or the revelation of the murder took place, I would have said that I lived a very blessed life. I lived a very good life. I lived a very fulfilled life, right? Because from this moment, there is nothing worth living, nothing serious in mortality. Mortality means living, right? There is nothing worth living from this point, because I have seen the murder of the king. That is, I have seen the dead body of King Duncan. And everything is but toys, means everything is meaningless. It has absolutely no meaning. The renowned and the graceful king, King Duncan is dead. The wine of life is drawn and the mere lees is left this wall to brag of. And he says that the wine of life, and that's what he's comparing King Duncan with, something which is so good quality wine is supposed to be of good quality. The wine of life has been poured away, and only the dregs, the lees is referring to the leftovers. The lees is a reference to the leftovers. Only the leftovers are remaining right now for the heavens to boast about. The cellars to, the vault means the cellars, the heavens to boast about. So there is really nothing left out of there because the wine of life has been poured away. Malcolm and Donalbain enter and ask, what is amiss? What is the matter? And Macbeth says, you are and do not know it. The spring, the head, the fountain of your blood is stopped. The very source of it is stopped. So he says, you are missing a father. Your amiss means you are missing a father, but you do not know about it yet because you have just about walked in. The spring, the source, the head, because they come from King Duncan, right? The origin, the fountain of your blood has been stopped. The person from where you kind of shed your blood, the bloodline, that has been stopped. The source from where your royal blood comes has been stopped. And Macbeth, in very plain terms, says, your royal father has been killed. Malcolm says, by whom? Those of his chamber, as it seemed, had done it. Their hands and faces were all bathed with blood. So who says it? Lennox says that it seems that the guards who were entrusted with the job of watching and protecting him, they were the ones who killed him because their hands and faces were all covered with blood. What we have already known, what Lady Macbeth and Macbeth had done, were unwiped, we found upon their pillows, so were their daggers. So it says that daggers were also which we found unwiped. That is, the blood was still on the daggers and still bloody that were there on their pillows, the way the Macbeths had kept them over there. They stared us in confusion. They looked at us completely confused and looked distracted. Why did they look distracted? Because that was the effect of the alcohol that Lady Macbeth had fed them the previous night. Okay, the effect of the possets which had been drugged by Lady Macbeth. And no man's life should have been trusted with them. No man's life should have been trusted with him, let alone King Duncan's life, right? So that's what had happened. Macbeth, oh, yet I do repent me of my fury that I did kill them. Now Macbeth reveals that in my fury, in my anger, at the revelation of King Duncan. So look at what a brilliant actor this fellow is. He says, at the fury which I felt on discovering King Duncan's body, I regret it now that I actually went ahead and killed those guards. Okay, so Macbeth says, Macbeth says, what did you do that for? Well, Macbeth then replies, well, who can be wise, amazed, temperate and furious, loyal and neutral in a moment? He uses about half a dozen adjectives and he says, can anyone be wise, shocked, calm and furious, loyal and neutral, all in the same breath, all at the same time? No man can do that. And that's what he tells Macbeth. No man, the expedition of my violent love, outrun the pauser reason. So he says, no man can do that because my love for Duncan resulted in a violent rage, in violent anger that made me kill even before I could pause to think. Even before I could think rationally, my love for Duncan made me to kill those two security guards. Here lay Duncan, outrun the pauser means, even before I could pause to think, reason means, I could pause to think logically, rationally, whether I should do something like this. But my love for Duncan, my violent love actually had the better of me. Here lay Duncan, his silver skin laced with his golden blood, and his gashed stabs looked like a breach in nature for ruin's wasteful entrance. So he says, Duncan lay here. His white skin, silver skin means his absolutely white, maybe referring to pale skin, splattered with his precious golden. Golden also used to be referred for blood during the times of Shakespeare, covered in gashes, as in wounds that look like wounds to nature itself, right? Breach in nature, as if nature had been violated in some way. To let the rot in for ruin's wasteful entrance. That is, there had been wounds on his body by the dagger, as a result of which for the rot to set in. Those wounds were like, will obviously get diseased when somebody had been stabbed like that. And there next to him, there the murderers, steeped in the colors of their trade, their daggers unmannerly breached with gore. And there next to him, I saw the murderers dripping in blood, steeped in the colors of their trade, right? Which is dripped in blood, their daggers breached in gore. It was a gory kind of sight. Who would have stopped himself? He's kind of trying to explain himself. Who would have, for ruins festival, for there the murderers steeped in the colors of their trade, their daggers unmanly breached with gore. Who could refrain that had a heart to love, and in that heart courage to makes love known. So he says, who could have stopped himself to love Duncan and had the courage to act on it? So he's talking of himself in two ways, that I love Duncan and I had the courage to act on the basis of that love and to take this kind of a decision. Though I think that, I should have probably not done that. Obviously, he's acting for the benefit of the larger audience. So through this manner of a very pompous kind of a speech by Macbeth, as I said, look at the language which has been used by Macbeth in his two passages right now after the discovery of the body. Shakespeare is trying to point to what? He's trying to point to his hypocrisy. Because before that, when Macduff and Lennox entered, if you see the dialogues, he's almost answering in single lines or in monosyllables. But now he's giving himself to rather lofty kind of language, right? So Shakespeare wants to highlight his hypocrisy, his double-faced nature at this point in time. And that's what he's doing. And the focus before, if you see what I said to you, that I'll tell you later, in the initial part, it was on himself, right? And not on Duncan. But now he's kind of also talking about Duncan. But, initially it was all about, what he is at that point in time. So that's also the difference that comes through. Lady Macbeth says, help me out of here quickly, right? So she's kind of pretending to kind of not be able to handle this kind of a situation. Macduff says, look to the lady. That is, take care of the lady. Malcolm says in an aside to Donalbain, why do we hold our tongues that most may claim this argument for us? So, that is something which we will do in part 4. So, Macbeth's vivid description of the crime scene is something that Lady Macbeth possibly cannot endure, because he's kind of describing the crime scene in great detail in terms of the blood and the wounds and the rot having set in, right? Because she has been inside in the same chamber just a few moments before, right? So it shows, it is probably a hint to what kind of a weak constitution she essentially has, that she is not able to endure the vivid description of the murder scene, right? Which is why she says, help me out of here. So we will pause video 3 out here. I hope you have been able to understand the narrative and the different words that have been spoken, especially by Macbeth in this particular part of Act 2, Scene 3. And we will conclude this particular scene with the explanation video number 4, where essentially the two brothers, Malcolm and Donalbain, decide what their next course of action ought to be. See you now in explanation video number 4. Ta-da, bye-bye.